All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Thursday it is. And if you're in Vancouver here, you'll know that it's going to be ridiculously hot for the next few days. So if you're in Vancouver, try to stay cool. If you can, stay inside, or go in the water, or find air conditioning at the mall, or just dunk cold water on yourself in the shower or whatever. Actually, a cold shower is a good thing. Yeah. Like to cool you off. If you kind of start off like slightly warm and then just keep going colder and as cold as you can manage. Yeah. That can help too. If you go, colder you can manage to go, the better it'll work. But yeah, that might work. Anyway, let's see. So Elizabeth is here. Good morning, Elizabeth. Hamad is here. Good morning, Hamad. Basil's here. Good morning, Basil. Sean is here. Good morning, Sean. Ryan's here. Good morning, Ryan. Reza's here. Good morning, Reza. Simran is here. Good morning, Simran. Awais is here. Good morning to you. And Hassan is here. Good morning, Hassan. Okie dokie. So, let's see. Oh, yes. Good morning, Rafay. All right. Yesterday we were finishing watching this documentary. Three of you are like huddled together for protection here. We finished watching this documentary, and there was, I think, some interesting things to think about, right? And we're getting sort of the experience related to us by a number of young women. They're from different cultures, right? They have different experiences, but we're also hearing kind of some of the same things, right? And that they feel that their lives are kind of limited, or there's barriers in their lives that men don't have. Can you just remind me maybe of a couple of those, things, important things that some of those young women said? Things that they couldn't do, or barriers that were in the way of them kind of living their lives?
Not being able to go out at night, because the men, they won't let them, especially
Yeah.
make a lot of sexual comments.
Right. So, I guess we could maybe even make that more general and say that younger girls or women are more conscious of where they go, right, and when, because their safety. They're unfortunately, women are less safe than men in public, right? And so young women have to be more careful, right? And they have to either go with friends or go with or just go another time, right? What else are we hearing from these girls? Oh, the sexual comments, right? The sexual comments, right? So there's lots of kind of verbal harassment, if you will. I don't think I told this story in here, but maybe I'll tell it now. The two guys in the alleyway were saying, oh well, if these guys don't want, or if girls don't want compliments, then they shouldn't dress up, right? They shouldn't wear makeup. And I think Ben said that was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard, and he was probably right. But I'll tell you a story, because this is something that never happens to me, but it happened to me once, and it was enlightening in a way. So I used to work in Russia. So when I was doing my master's and my PhD, I was in Russia and I was working there. And so one morning I got on a little bus in Russia. It's just a little van thing. Hop into the van, and sitting across from me is this young woman, and she's dressed very nice. I think she's probably on her way to work or whatever. And she gives me the scan, right? The full up and down look. And it was, what's that?
Were you happy?
Well, this is the thing. For a second I was, right? Because I was like, oh yeah, all right, I felt good about that. But what do you think my next thought was after that? Why? Well, it's not,
Was it not a question?
like, why is she checking me out? Well, I assumed that I knew the answer. But I didn't think that so much. So at first there was like a, oh yeah, all right, you know, right? I kind of felt good about myself, but then immediately after that, I started to feel really self-conscious, right? Because, I started thinking, oh man, like, am I dressed okay? Like, I actually had hair at the moment. Is my hair all right? I know my hair is not all right now, but is my hair okay? Like, do I look, and you start kind of fussing, right? You start feeling very self-conscious about, do I look good? Because now, I know she's looking at me, right? I know she is, and it was, and she got off a few stops later or whatever, and I probably didn't think about that experience too much until I started doing social justice here, and I was like, oh, like I wonder how that feels for women who are getting checked out all the time, because I won't speak for your cultures or for your countries here, but here in Canada, guys or girls don't really check out guys visibly. They do check them out, but you can't tell, right? So they'll just kind of, very carefully look, right? So if a girl is checking you out, most of the time you don't know about it as a guy. But yeah, like I wonder how that feels for girls who are checked out all the time, right? Who are constantly staring at them, right? Or even go so far as to make comments, right? And I remember, back in Russia, I remember that, I felt like, oh, because it never happens. And then I felt self-conscious and uncomfortable. And, the girl in the story here she was a young, attractive young woman, right? I did not mind being checked out by her, right? But, what if she was a guy checking me out, right? Would I feel as comfortable? What if what if I was a woman and he was this giant, intimidating looking guy, right? Would I feel okay with that, right? How would I feel? And so, I feel like I kind of had a little glimpse of what women have to deal with in sort of constantly being looked at, constantly being stared at, constantly being checked out. And again, depending on who's doing the looking, it can be a little ego boost, right? If you see someone who you think is really good looking and they check you out, you're like, yeah, right? But you don't welcome those comments from everyone. And I wonder if it's, if there's a lot of it, if there's a lot of kind of attention coming your way, I imagine it can make you very uncomfortable or self-conscious, or, kind of, you would almost like build a little wall around yourself in public so that you don't notice that people are looking at you all the time, right? So again, I don't know if that translates or if it's the same thing, but I feel like I had a little glimpse of, what many women deal with all the time, right? And, in the society here, I have the privilege of being a man, and most people don't check me out, right? Or if they do, I don't know it. So yeah, I can kind of walk through the world and, not have to worry about eyes being on me, right? Whereas women don't have that same privilege, right? And again, the more attractive you are, the more eyes are on you, right? And the more self-conscious, I would imagine, it would make you, but I don't really know. What else do we hear from these girls? Maybe like one or two more things, and then we'll move on.
Did Jordan wrote she couldn't be one of prejudice?
In Jordan, there seemed to be pretty clear and mutually exclusive gender roles, right? Women do this sort of stuff, men do this sort of stuff, right? And her brother's out hanging out with his friends, playing some basketball, but that's not what girls do, right? Girls do things that are softer, right? And again, the shooting of guns was a little confusing, right? I didn't quite, to my perception, that seems like more of a manly thing, but I don't know. But yeah, we had pretty clear gender roles, right? And so Mira's life was, had some restrictions on it that maybe her brother didn't. Good morning. Although I will point out to you that they had a pretty big age difference, right? She's 15, he's 21. That's a big difference, right? She's 15-year-olds are not going to have all the same freedoms that 21-year-olds have. But I think it's still a valid comment that there's a difference. Yeah?
Probably point out the fact that I think even if she was old, she would still consult the parents on who to marry, but the brother wouldn't. I feel like the brother would just bring anybody.
Yeah.
Point out.
The other thing that's probably worth mentioning here too is, cultures differ in terms of parental involvement, right? And so, here in the West, as you grow up and you get into your sort of teen years and late teen years, parents are stepping back, right? We're kind of encouraging our children to be independent, right? And so we're kind of becoming less involved in their lives, right? But that's not the same for all cultures, right? Some cultures, parents remain very involved in their kids' lives, and and sometimes they're like making decisions for them that, from a Western perspective, the West would say, well, no, that's the kid's decision, that's not the parents'. But those are cultural ideas that differ as well. So I imagine here in Jordan that, maybe they have a little more parental involvement than maybe Western parents would. What's that?
I can confirm.
You can confirm that?
Like, either man or a girl, you have to meet the family, and then the parents decide if it's the right fit for you.
Right. Yeah, and so from a Western perspective, that would be like, what are you talking about, right? But I don't know. Do you think there's any? Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked here. But do you think there's any kind of benefit to that, like your parents being so involved in the choice of a marriage partner? Make sure what? Yeah, like make sure that you love, that they love you.
They love your partner.
Oh, that they okay. Oh yeah, okay.
Because
Gotcha.
It's the same thing, even back home. It's the same thing, but it's not like they're too involved there because they'll tell you no, no, no. But like they tell you it's not right for you. But
Right.
if you insist, then the rest should be.
Yeah.
That's how it is. It's not like they're too much into it. Is it
Yeah.
something?
Yeah.
So if you insist a lot, they'll just let you be, but they'll tell you at the beginning it's not the right person.
Right.
Pros and cons, but like you insist,
Yeah.
they'll just let you be. But it's like they'll tell you the rest is all on, like the father told you that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's how it is.
Which I think is, and I think that's probably in line with the way things are here too.
But most of the times they're right.
Yeah.
That's the key.
They're
Most families I've seen, most of the times they're right. That inputs are right.
yeah. Well,
I don't know if it's something.
I don't know. Well, because I remember in some of my classes with my anthropology classes that were mostly Indian students from India, and I asked them because traditionally Indian families arrange marriages for their children, and so I asked them. I said, is that something that you like? Will your marriages be arranged? Is that something you want? Is it changing? What's happening? And from a Western perspective, it was like no, right? Like, what a nightmare to have your parents choose your marriage partner, right? That's awful. But a couple people explained it to me, and in some ways it makes sense, right? Because who knows you better than your parents, right? Probably no one. Maybe no one.
But if you do, you don't tell parents, right?
That's true. That's true.
So
But
they probably choose what they want for you.
yeah, but it's true. Maybe your parents don't know everything about you, but they know you really well, maybe better than anyone else. Do they have your best interests at heart?
Yeah.
Hopefully, right? Hopefully they want the best for you. And so if anyone was going to choose, and it wasn't going to be you, they're probably the people, right? And theoretically, they've been probably married for 20 years or 25 years, and so they know how marriages are. I mean, like if you weren't going to choose and you had to get anyone else to choose, like they're the people, right? So, once it was explained to me from that perspective, I was like, okay, I can see that, right? I still don't want it, but I can understand how how it might make sense. Okay, any last things? Vigdis, Mira, Lulu, good morning. Shui Shui.
I didn't quite get what the other guys were saying most of the time.
You didn't get what she was saying?
Yeah, most of the time.
Just because of her accent, or just?
Like, yeah, I couldn't hear.
Oh, she was, I think, can anyone maybe comment on that, what Vigdis was talking about, from the girl from Iceland? Do you remember what her deal was, and what her sort of... She was kind of, I feel like she was kind of the least memorable of the four of them. She was pretty quiet, and often they were talking to not so much her, but other people around her, right? Like her family or her friends. But, she talked about, she feels that some people don't take her seriously as a woman, right? When she speaks up, people are more likely to listen to or believe men rather than women. She said that, what else did she say? Oh, she talked about being a feminist, right? Where, sometimes, if she says she's a feminist, people think, oh, she's just gonna like go on and on about feminism, right? So she's hesitant to kind of call herself a feminist because of that. And then when they were having breakfast at her place, she was talking about, or her dad and her brother was talking about the idea that, women are encouraged to sort of go out and have careers and, kind of do what they want, but they also have to do the home stuff as well, right? So they still have their traditional job of taking care of the house and raising the kids, but they have, they can have any career they want, but they still have the same responsibilities that they used to, right? None of those responsibilities have really been taken away. So there was that going on too, that she just talked about. Okie dokie. Any last things to say about this before we move on? No? Okay. The question in this documentary was, what stands in the way of women being equal to men, right? And one of the things that, or where kind of Ross landed at the end of his documentary was he said that, like, we're standing in the way, right? Our sort of traditional way of doing things, our cultures, our socialization, that's kind of what keeps us stuck in a state of inequality, right? There's no exterior force here, right? There's no barrier that women can't get past. It's just us, right? We have to change our thinking and our way of looking at things. But I wanted to sort of explore just a little more how that works. So how society and socialization creates a barrier for women in this case, okay? So again, what we're talking about here, sorry, I hope I'm not gonna sneeze. Okay. One of the things we're talking about here is patriarchy, right? And patriarchy comes from two Greek words, if you want to know, patris and archon. Patris is father in Greek, and archon is ruler, right? So you have the father as the ruler. And so the patriarchy is the idea that men are in charge, right? They have power, but they're most often seen as the ones who should have power, right? So the idea that men are logical, right, and strong-willed and capable of making the hard choice, right? Those are things that we associate with men, right? And so we often see men as leaders, but we often make them leaders as well. And since they hold power in society, they are able to create society in a way that benefits them further, right? This is patriarchy, right? The idea that men have power. So I want to show you this very short video, and I want to show it to you just to give you some background, because I want to talk about women's suffrage. I don't know why it's called suffrage, but suffrage is the right to vote, okay? I want to talk about this with you, but if you don't know anything about the history of women gaining the right to vote, it'll be difficult to talk about. So I just want to watch this video so that you have a little bit of background in how that's gone, okay? I'm just going to put something in Microsoft Teams here so that the people at home can kind of follow along. To give you just a little bit of a start in background, sorry, I can't do two things at once. I'm a really bad multitasker. Okay. Okay. Women, of course, didn't always have the right to vote here in Canada and the United States. Okay, so going back, if you go back 100 years or so, maybe a little bit more. Let's say if you go back to 1900 in Canada and the U.S., politics is basically a man's world, right? Government is made up of men. Men have the right to vote, and women kind of stay at home and tell their husbands what they think, right? That's how politics is strictly a man's world, right? But starting in the early 1900s, some women push for the right to vote, right? They feel that it's unfair, right? How do they make up 50% of the population and have no votes, right? How is that fair? And so suffragists, so women who are pushing for the right to vote, start demonstrating, start contacting members of government, trying to get the government to give them the right to vote. Of course, they are eventually successful because we know here in Canada that both women and men can vote, right? But it's a bit of a process, and there are some things standing in their way. But I'll show you those, okay? So again, I've got the link in Microsoft Teams here. So online people, we're just going to watch this video and then come back and talk about what kind of things were holding women back from being able to vote here, okay? So let's watch the video and then we'll come right back. So online people, will see you in just a few minutes, okay? The link is in Microsoft Teams. So, okay, so a little bit of background in terms of how women gain the right to vote in Canada, right? And it's kind of an interesting process, but what are some of the things that are kind of holding women back in this period? How are women not able to vote, or what's preventing them from gaining that right? Yeah. Yes, men, but in what ways? Yeah, I guess there's these, sorry, I'm still sniffy. Um, there are these stereotypes about women, right, that hold them back. What do those stereotypes say about women? What's that?
To keep the boss rate right, they have to stay
Right. Yeah, there's this idea that if we let women into politics, they'll just become like politics crazy, right? And they'll only pay attention to politics, and like families will fall apart, right? Women will forget about their children, and social collapse, right? Seems likely. What other kind of stereotypes are there about women here? Yeah. Too emotional, right? Too emotional, too fragile, too illogical, right? These are the stereotypes about women, right? What else is kind of holding these women back? So there's some stereotypical ideas. There's men in general. What else is there? There's some little quotes they have at the beginning there. One of them is a law, right? The law expressly says that women shall not have the right to vote, right? So it's not like when they were writing the laws they just forgot to include them. They specifically said no women voters, right? So the law itself is holding them back. What else is holding them back? Other written things.
There's a thing they say about the man is the house ruler and the women should be voting.
Yeah, where are they kind of getting those ideas from? The what? Yeah. So some of these men in government are using religious justifications, right? That look in the Bible. The Bible says that man was not made for the woman, but the woman was made for the man, right? And there are these ideas that women should be subservient to men, and men should rule over their wives, right? And again, that shows up in the Bible, and until recently it showed up in wedding vows as well, right? It was, do you take this man to be your husband, to honor and obey, I think was the original wording. They've kind of changed it now to make it a little more modern. What's that? To honor and to, maybe it's like to honor and to love, or to cherish and something. The obey part has been removed, right? But in the past, the traditional vows had obey, right? So you were promising to do what your husband told you to do, right? That was right there in the marriage vows, right? So there's a few things kind of holding them back, right? There's law, there's religion, there's stereotypical ideas. What else do we see? Anything else holding them back? That you can think of here, or that you've seen? Okay, then how do they achieve the right to vote?
One of the ladies, she started a movement for the provincial vote, and
Yeah.
then that gained a lot of interest overnight.
Yeah.
So there was some fuss
Yeah.
And then they gained it, and also because of the World War, the Great War.
Right. So first of all, there are these suffragists, right, that are trying to raise awareness, right? They've got signs and they're giving speeches. Nellie McClung there, who's quite famous in the Prairie Provinces and in Alberta as kind of one of the early leaders of women's rights here in Canada. She puts on a little play, right, and reverses the roles and says, oh, if we gave men the right to vote, then they would just, lose their heads. And it's very funny, right? The play was very, very comic. People had a good laugh, but people started to kind of take notice, right? And you saw that they kind of gained that right to vote incrementally, right? They gained it in Manitoba, and then in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and other provinces start to follow. So it's just like little victories along the way, right? Even though they don't get the full right to vote, they're able to move forward a bit at a time, right? What did the First World War have to do with women's right to vote?
Their contribution to the country.
Right.
Like all the men they went to the front line.
Right.
So they helped the country's economy and provided all the resources for the war.
Yeah, so women were able to kind of point to their efforts during the war, right? All these men went off to fight, and women had to step into factory jobs all kinds of jobs really to keep the economy going, right? So women have a huge role to play in World War I, and so they're able to point to that and say, look, we're doing this. We deserve a vote too, right? We deserve the right to say what we want, right? And it eventually you can see that it works, right? Bills are introduced and passed. Robert Borden is a sly fox. Did you see what he did there? Do you see what he did? So he was trying to get reelected, right? And he knew he was going to have to pass a conscription bill. What's conscription?
All the males, above the age of 18 or something. It's a mandatory for them to join the
Yeah, so it makes military service mandatory, right? So in some countries you have so anyone here have mandatory military service in their country? You have to serve in the military? What? Singapore does? Italy? Used to have it, doesn't have it anymore. Iran? Oh, you're not Iranian. Where are you from?
Pakistan.
Oh, you're from Pakistan. I didn't know that. Does Pakistan have mandatory? Doesn't have it? Anybody?
Iran does.
Iran does? Yeah. I know Russia does, for sure. So Israel does. Depending on where you go, you can still have mandatory conscription. But at the time, there is no conscription in Canada. So all the guys who fought in World War I volunteered to go. They chose to go. But as, millions of people are dying over in Europe in World War I, they need more soldiers. The young men that are still in Canada are like, everybody over there is dying, so I think I'll sit this one out, right? And so the government has to conscript them. But it's controversial. People are kind of, they disagree about whether conscription should be used. And so what does Borden do? He says, okay, well, we're going to give the vote to women, but only women who are serving in the military or who have husbands or brothers or fathers who are serving in the military as well, right? Do you think that those women are going to vote for conscription? Yeah, right. They want someone to go over there and help out their brothers and their husbands and their fathers, right? So he strategically gives the vote to people who will vote for what he wants to put through, right? And so they vote for conscription, they vote for him, so he gets in the next election. Pretty strategic, right? And so again, women kind of luck out, right? They've been pushing their cause, and then Robert Borden gets to make a bit of a political move, right? He gives the vote to the people who will appreciate him for it, and then he gets those votes. He gets elected as prime minister again, right? Very sneaky. But he kind of makes good of it by giving, by extending that right to vote to all women afterward, right? So he kind of Yeah, he makes up for it, I think. It's a bit of a political play, but he makes up for it. But the film also points out that do all women get the right to vote in Canada? No, right? So who's really getting the right to vote here in 1918 or 1920?
The one who are in the free service and the one who meet the same qualifications as male.
Yes, and so in terms of sort of race or ethnicity, it's
Like Asians, they could not,
yeah,
and indigenous people, they could not either.
yeah.
And I guess some certain religion people.
Yeah, so this is really, this is a victory, right? This is a victory for women for sure, but it's not a victory for all women in Canada, right? It's a victim. It's a victory for white women in Canada, right? And people of color, indigenous people, they're going to have to wait quite a bit longer. And indeed for indigenous women, it's going to take them until I think 1960 to gain the right to vote. So again, when we say, oh, women gained the right to vote in Canada in 1917, it's like, yes, but, right? Only some women did, and some women continue to be denied that. Some people continue to be denied that. Okay, let's take a break here because we've been working hard. I'll come back, we'll break this down a little bit. I'll point out a few more things, and then I have a question for you, okay? But I'll wait until we get back, okay? Break time. All right. Okay, and we're back. So, like I mentioned, we watched this sort of short video here on women's suffrage in Canada and how they sort of gained the right to vote and what they did to achieve it. But I just want to sort of pull apart some of these things that we've talked about very quickly and point out a few things to you, okay? So, first of all, keep in mind that yes, women played an important role in gaining the right to vote, right? I imagine if women didn't make a big fuss about it, that they still wouldn't have the right to vote, right? Men wouldn't hand it over to them unless they pushed for it, right? And so women had an instrumental role in gaining the right to vote. But keep in mind that, of course, they couldn't give themselves the right to vote, right? And why was that? Well, because they didn't have any institutional power, right? So we talked about social institutions in society. They are things that kind of allow society to work, right? They serve a function for society. So we said there's the government and education and religion, the military, the media, the criminal justice system, the family. All of those things are social institutions. But if we look, actually if we still look, for the most part, men are the ones who control those institutions, right? And so they had institutional power. Only men could grant women the right to vote. Women couldn't grant it to themselves, right? So having institutional power is important, right? Because you can sort of give yourself power, or you can take it away from others, right? So men controlled these major social institutions, right? Like government and medicine and the military and all that stuff. And again, because they controlled those institutions, they were able to kind of infuse their prejudice into society, right? And so we kind of saw that happening in, say, the Big Bang Theory, right? In the Big Bang Theory, we had lots of misogyny, right? We had lots of sexism. We had lots of prejudice against women. And the writers of that show were able to spread or transmit those ideas because they controlled the media, right? They were the owners and the writers and producers of the show and the producers of the television producers, the network. Most of those people are men, right? And so it was very easy for them to transmit those prejudices through the show. And here, sorry, I'm really sniffy. Here, we see men transmitting those prejudices in a number of different ways, right? So we certainly heard stereotypes about women being too, soft or fragile or emotional or illogical, right? And those kind of ideas were backed up by science, right? Scientists felt that women were inferior to men, right? That men were kind of the default version of human beings, right? And so, any women's health issue was actually seen. Ooh, that didn't sound good. Any women's health issue was actually seen through kind of a lens of abnormality, right? And so, women's bodies are different than men's bodies, duh. But any sort of health issue that affected women and didn't affect men wasn't really treated with the same attention, right? And not even with the same kind of idea, right? If you how do I phrase this? Yeah, how does your practice of medicine change when you think that like everything about women is, there's something wrong because men are the normal version of something, right? How does that change how you do medicine? And I won't go into the history of medicine because I don't know it very well. But if you do study the history of medicine, you will see a pretty stark difference in how they deal with men and women. And part of how they deal with them differently is this underlying assumption that women are inferior, I guess, right? And so there's not really as much compassion or understanding for women's health issues as there is for men's health issues, okay? So we had scientists kind of backing up the idea that women were in some way inferior, right? And who do you think most of those scientists were, men or women? Men, right? We had people in church, we had clergy, we had priests and so on, giving their Sunday sermons and talking about, stuff from the Bible. And the Bible says some of the same things, right? That women were made for men, and women are to obey their husbands, right? And so we have the church kind of backing up that idea, right? We have psychiatrists backing up the idea that, again, women's kind of mental health is not as sort of, well, that women aren't as mentally tough as men, right? And again, think about, let's pretend for a second we believe this, okay? So let's pretend that we believe that men are more logical and rational, okay? And let's just say that we believe women are more kind of soft and emotional, okay? Let's just say, I don't know if that's true, but let's just say we believe that. How should we make a decision? Should we make our decisions logically and rationally, or should we make them with emotion and empathy, right? Our kind of stereotypical idea in society is that, leaders have to be tough, right? They have to make the tough decisions. They have to be logical and rational, right? But that's a societal value as well, right? What if the societal value was, no, we're going to make our decisions with empathy and compassion and caring, not with cold, hard rationality, right? Imagine a government that worked that way, right? Imagine a government that worked on compassion rather than, pure logic and hard choices, right? But again, men are seen as logical and rational, and what do we prize in our leaders? Logic and rationality, right? And so men kind of fit themselves into that role because the thing that we value is the thing that we say that they are. Does that make sense? Yeah. So again, psychiatrists here are kind of setting up men as the default, right? It is normal for, leaders to be rational and clear-headed and logical. That's what leaders need to be. That's what men are. Women aren't that, and so they need to stay on the sidelines, right? If you looked at history, and if you still look at history to some degree is a history of men, right? And for the most part, a history of old white men. Part of that is because lots of the people in power were old white men, and so they were the ones kind of doing the things that we're studying. But also, historians didn't really care much about women, right? They weren't really interested in women's stories because they thought, oh, well, they didn't really do anything, right? That kind of imbalance has since been rectified, right? There are lots of feminist historians and feminist sociologists and anthropologists who are looking more at women's history and women's experience. But at the time, science was a science of men, right? And because men had control of all of these social institutions, again, they were able to enforce their prejudice, right? Women were saying, we deserve the right to vote, we deserve a place in politics, and basically every part of society was saying, no, you don't, right? So it wasn't just the government, it was science, it was medicine, it was the school system, right? It was history, it was religion, right? All of these things were coming back and saying, no, the place of women isn't in politics, the place of women is in the home, right? Listening to and obeying her husband, right? And that's difficult to fight against, right? If it's just the government saying no, that's one thing. But when every part of society is echoing the same message, it becomes very difficult not to believe, right? Have we said that before? Yeah. And indeed, it was very difficult not to believe that. And so these women who were fighting for the right to vote had to convince men, but they also had to convince other women, surprisingly. There were lots of women out there that thought, well, no, I don't need the right to vote. My husband can vote. I'll just tell him what I think and then he'll go vote. Right? So some women didn't actually see this as, a right that they should have that they were denied. Right? So because again, everyone is socialized, right? Everyone is absorbing the same messages, right? Many women thought, no, that that's politics is for men, right? Women, we don't do that. We do other things, right? And so again, where was I going for that? Yeah, so the convincing needed to be done on both sides because everyone is absorbing the same social messages, okay? And also keep in mind that even if you bumped into a man from this time who thought, yes, women should have the right to vote, I know they don't, but they should, that man is still benefiting from the fact that women don't, right? So you can't sort of extract yourself by disagreeing, right? You can't say, oh, well, I'm not a part of the problem because I don't agree with this, right? You still are in a way because you still benefit, right? And so I think I've said that before with Canada's Indigenous people, right? I benefit from the fact that I'm living here as a white person, and I'm benefiting because Indigenous people have been denied certain rights, right, for hundreds of years, and I'm not okay with that, right? I don't agree with that, but it doesn't matter if I agree or not. I still have benefited, and I probably will, at least in the near future, right? Again, I don't have to like it or agree with it, but this is the machine that we are all in, right? Right, so I think I introduced this a long time ago, maybe right at the beginning of the course. I said that, well, not right at the beginning, but when we talked about oppression, I said oppression is historical and ideological and institutional and cultural, right? And we've kind of touched on some of these things with this suffrage idea, right? So again, oppression is historical. So if you look back to 1900 and prior to, you'll see that government was, oh God, sorry. Whew. Okay, just the allergies. My sinuses are doing all sorts of things. Right. Government has historically been made up of men, right? And so if tomorrow we elect a government that is all women, right, it's kind of not the end of sexism because the government still operates in ways that privilege men, right? Most of the laws that are on the books have been written by and for men. So even if we elect women tomorrow, all women to the government tomorrow, or the entire government is women, even if we do that, sexism is not over, right? Because there are policies and procedures that need to change. There's ways that society operates, way that the government operates that has to change. You can't just kind of end it that quickly, right? Because again, oppression is complex, right? And it works in a number of different ways. Same thing in the US, right? You can't get rid of racism by electing a black president, right? That didn't do it. Although I think when he was elected first in 2008, that was his first year. I miss those days. Even when Barack Obama was first elected, yeah, some foolish people were saying, we're in a post-racial country now, right? It's the end of racism. And again, that was maybe the second stupidest thing that was ever said. But yeah, like you can't end these things just in a single stroke, right? Because the entire machine of society works in this way that perpetuates inequality, right? So, would it be great if they elected another black president in the US? Fantastic, right? Would it be great if we had a woman prime minister here in Canada? Phenomenal, right? Does it change things overnight? Not really, right? It takes a lot more work. Incidentally, we did have a female prime minister for a very short time in Canada. She was, oh God, it's a complicated story, and I don't really know it very well. But she, how was it? I think the leader of her party stepped down. She became the leader of that party, and then she became the prime minister. Everybody was really excited, and then before the election, she kind of said or did a bunch of things that turned people off, and so she didn't get elected in again. But for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months, we had a female prime minister. And if she had kind of played her cards right, she may have been elected again. People were very excited when she was first, kind of stepped into the office, but then things didn't go well for her.
Singapore has a female president.
What's that?
Singapore has a female president.
First one, or?
I think the current one.
Yeah, but is she the first female or no?
Yeah.
Yeah? How's it going for her?
No one really cares. The president of Singapore doesn't do much.
Mm.
It's like Canada, like the prime minister does everything.
Oh no. No, my friend.
Well, in Singapore, the prime minister does everything.
Oh, okay. Well, and that's the same thing here. Like, we don't have a president in Canada, but the prime minister is very powerful
Yeah.
in Canada.
It's basically like the prime minister is kind of the president, just without the title.
Yeah.
The president just sits there and just like occasionally approves it.
Right. Kind of a figurehead a little
Yeah.
more. Yeah. In Canada, we have a governor general that probably serves some of the purposes of the president. But yeah, our structure is a little different. But no, the prime minister in Canada is a very powerful office. And I would suggest that within their countries, that the prime minister in Canada is more powerful than the US president within the United States. Yeah. So globally speaking, sure, the president of the United States is, yeah, you've got a lot of muscle on the world stage. But within the country, the US president is not so powerful as the prime minister is within Canada. So,
It's kind of the same thing.
yeah.
Not that strong. But even when the prime minister met with Donald Trump, I don't think the president went at all.
No?
So, just
Yeah, the prime minister here though can make a lot of things happen, especially if they have a majority government. Although I will go on record as saying I'm not happy with Justin Trudeau right now. I've got about 5 things that he's done recently that have deeply annoyed me. So,
Was it what he did with Boris?
Boris?
Boris Johnson?
What did he do with Boris?
I think like they talked about something that pissed off the whole world.
He was trying. Was that at the G7?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe. I think Trudeau was trying to mediate between. He's trying to mediate between 2 countries, and the 2 countries were like, "Thanks, we're good." No, it's not that. It's the Quebec language thing is annoying me. Bill C-10, his budget that he recently tabled, this whole thing with the Manitoba Institute of Microbiology or whatever it's called. Yeah, he's acting very he's acting like he can do whatever he wants, and everything he does is correct, and he can just do whatever he wants without anyone questioning him, which I don't really like, especially because I don't agree with the things he's doing. Oh yeah, Pakistan had a waste. Pakistan's had a female prime minister twice, which is very impressive, right? Which is also interesting because, I think most Westerners would look at Pakistan and suggest that they are not a very equal society. I think most Westerners would probably be surprised to hear that, I'm going to sneeze in a minute, that Pakistan that Pakistan had 2 female prime minister, or a female prime minister twice. That would be no? You have no idea? Okay, that would be surprising to most Westerners, I would think. Why? Because most Westerners, I think, see a country like Pakistan through a lens, right? Through a set of stereotypical ideas, right? The idea that it is maybe less developed, less sophisticated, more unequal, more sexist, maybe very religious. Some of those ideas may be true, but I think that would surprise a lot of Westerners.
Singapore has only had 2 prime ministers, and they all come from the same family,
Mm,
their father and son.
interesting.
I think his son might be the next prime minister.
Were they good prime ministers? Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
You know, surprisingly, Benazir Bhutto,
yeah.
if she was a prime minister, I have no idea if she was. Um, she might have been good, but her husband, he literally sold out our country for money for his personal use.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like he took so many loans from other countries like China, America, and Japan, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he just used it for his own benefit to buy mansions, land, create
Uh,
factories. Now the country's like in so much debt that we can't even go forward.
Is there a big is that a big issue in Pakistan? Corruption? Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a big issue for a lot of countries. My partner's from Peru, and Peru is just coming out of an election at the moment, and I think they had something like 18 people running for president of Peru. They finally narrowed it down to 2. Both of them are corrupt. One of
whoever was less corrupt.
one of them is the daughter of a former corrupt president who's actually in prison for corruption.
How do people even vote for them?
And she's running and almost winning. And one of her campaign promises is to let her father out of jail. Don't laugh. It's not funny. It's not funny. The other guy is kind of the other guy is probably corrupt too, but he's kind of like a communist Marxist type guy. So who knows what he'll do if he gets into power. And like they have nothing but bad choices on that election card. There's nothing but bad choices for Peru. So yeah.
You know, kind of, if you just think of it, it's the people living in the country. It's their fault that they're like in the first place they're even there at that position.
Yeah, well, what do you think about that? Is it their fault? Is the people's bad choices? Maybe they what?
Like, if they're all corrupt, maybe they got there not because of people choices.
But don't you think if people have raised voices, they wouldn't even have to do? If there was like a protest for them?
Power is something else.
Yeah.
Power is like way beyond what we think. So the people might have nice things.
My secret theory, not secret theory, my feeling, and I don't have a lot of evidence to back this up, is that colonialism has a lot of responsibility in sort of, colonial powers going into countries like Peru, doing a bunch of stuff, setting them up with a democracy and saying, okay, see you, and then they leave, and then it's a disaster because democracies require a lot of internal controls to make sure that they function properly and to sort of guard against corruption. But those take time to establish, right? You can't establish them overnight. And so, yeah, I think that, most of the countries that have trouble with corruption probably have a history of being colonized by other countries like Britain or France or Germany or the Netherlands or whoever, right? I would think so. But yeah, but then yeah, like what, like in a country like Peru or in Pakistan, like what do you do when you have, choices of leaders and they're corrupt? Like, what do you choose? Huh?
The one who pays you more for the vote.
The one who pays you more?
For the vote. That's what they do, they just buy the vote.
But it's your money, right? They're paying you. They're paying you for the vote with your money.
People like this don't get it.
And move out the country.
Exactly.
Well, and here in Canada, they do the same thing, right? Before an election, well, we're probably going to go into an election in the fall here in Canada, so you'll get to see a real live election in Canada as it happens. You'll see the government or the political parties promising a lot of money to people, right? Lower taxes, more funding for this program, more childcare funding, blah 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 blah. So yeah, they'll try to buy your vote too, not with direct money, but yeah, they'll spend your money trying to convince you to vote for them.
In Pakistan, it's like direct money. They cash.
Yeah. Yeah, that's corruption for you. Yeah. Interestingly, in Peru, voting is like legally mandatory. You must vote. You'll be fined if you don't vote.
In Singapore, they throw you into jail if you don't know.
Yeah.
You have to be above 21.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Peru is like that too. Not in Canada, of course. You can if you don't want to vote, you don't have to, but yeah.
I think because Singapore is already so small. The total population is not like 5 million.
5 million? Yeah, I guess you really need every vote definitely counts in Singapore.
Total 5 political parties.
Although in Canada, there's 36 million people. I would say maybe 20 million of them are eligible to vote. Maybe the other ones are too young, or just not citizens yet. So that's 20 million, but I bet less than 10 million turn out to vote every election. So yeah, that's still not many people. Okay, so we're totally off track here. What were we talking about? Okay, let me press pause. What I would like to ask you is I'm trying to work out kind of a final project for us. I have a couple more assignments for you to do soon, but I'm trying to work out a proper final project. And I think what I would like you to do is to do some research and present something. Okay, so I guess my question is, would that be okay with you? Would you present in class? And maybe online people, would you feel comfortable presenting to the class on the screen? So I wouldn't stream it on YouTube, so it wouldn't be for public consumption. So I'm the only one who's showing their face on YouTube. But for online people, we could hook it up so that the class can see you and so that you can see them, and we can do kind of a final presentation on a topic. Does that sound
Sounds fun.
workable? Yeah?
So that'll be the file.
Yeah, and I would like it to be, reasonably, well, we'll figure that out later. But that would be okay, a little bit of research, maybe a few slides. You'll talk a little bit and explain what you want to explain. Okay, I'll start putting that together, and I'll give you time to work on it too, because we'll want to present before the last day of class, right? So we'll probably need that last week to do those. So I'll figure that out and schedule it and try to build in some things that make sure that you can demonstrate what I need you to demonstrate. But Rafay?
So would it be like an individual presentation?
I think so. I think I'd like to. I know it's easier if you work in a group, but I think I really need to. I really want to see what you can do individually. So I think I'll maybe have you do it on your own. It'll take a little longer that way, but I think that's okay. Different topics. Different topics.
So you're going to come up with like a list that we choose from?
I can make some suggestions. I'd kind of rather you come up with it yourself.
So are you going to give us like a general topic and then we like pick it ourselves?
I'll try to give you some parameters and some ideas and places you can go. Okay, so I would like you to make the choice, but I'll help you to get there.
I feel like water does like make research related to things we studied, but no one does.
Yeah, what I think I'm going to ask you to do is to, look at a type of oppression. So, let's say some particular way in which we see sexism kind of manifesting itself or happening, looking at one specific way and then giving some detail on that. Okay. One of the misconceptions that students have, I think, is that they feel that if they're too specific, they won't be able to say anything. Like if you narrow your topic down too much, you won't be able to say anything. But it's actually the opposite. The narrower you can be, the more you can actually say. If you try to just talk about racism, it's too big, and you wind up just saying very general things that are not that interesting, right? But if you narrow it down, right, then you can start talking about some interesting stuff. Think about Adam Pearson, right? Adam did his documentary, and it was on disableism, but it was only people with facial disfigurements, right, in Britain. That's all he focused on, right? People with disabilities, people have all kinds of different disabilities and all kinds of different challenges, right? But Adam's like, nope, I'm just going to look at only people with facial disfigurements. And he talked for like an hour, right? And he easily could have talked longer, I'm sure. So again, the narrower you can make it, the more interesting it can actually be, right? Because you can talk in specifics. If you just say disableism or ableism, it's too general, and you can't really drill down and say anything interesting. All you can say is kind of the general stuff that everyone knows. Yes, it's a problem. Yes, people don't know about it. Yes, it affects lots of people, right? But again, if the narrower you can get, the more you can say. I mean, look at academics, right? They specialize in freshwater snails, and they write they write papers from when they're like 25 until they die, right? So you can do it too. Narrow is often better. Wide is often a general topic is usually a recipe for not saying anything very interesting, or not being able to sort of figure out what to say because it's too big, right? So, but I will give you some direction and some assistance to try to focus in on what you want to focus on, so that you have something interesting to say, right? Because that's what you want to do, right? Interesting. People like it when we say interesting things, right? Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm thinking of. I think it might be nice for you to do. We'll do some research. We'll talk about sources. We'll talk about citing. We'll talk about how to kind of put your ideas into some sort of an argumentative format. You can present. I can hear you talk. I can sit back with my feet up and drink my coffee and enjoy myself. It's not a reason why we're doing this, but I think that might be good. Awais is in, so that's good. So yeah, maybe we'll do that. And again, for online people, I can put you up here on the screen, but you won't be on YouTube, so the world will not see you. Only, the few people in this room. And so, yeah, I think that would be fun. Okay, I think I'll stop there because I don't want to get back into the sexism stuff, because we just went totally off the road with politics and Justin Trudeau and Peru and Pakistan and female prime ministers and all kinds of things. Reza is just saying here he's not familiar with presentation, so use Zoom. Yeah, Reza, we'd probably use either Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whichever one. Because I don't want to put you guys on YouTube, especially if you're not into that. That's not my. If you start your own YouTube channel, but but I'm not putting you on screen like that. yeah, so we'll figure that out and I'll give you some pointers there. Any last words? Question? Yes?
You said the last week of the semester? Or one was later?
Yeah, well, we'd probably do the presentations. We'd probably actually have you presenting in the last week.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's, is that the first week of August? Yeah, that's August. August 2nd is a holiday, so it would be like 3, 4, 5, 6 of August. Yeah, that's what that would be like. And yeah, I'll give you more information. I'll set up, you'll have a marking guide so that you'll know what I'm looking for. I'll help you narrow down a topic. We'll talk about research. We'll talk about sources. Easy peasy, yes? Easy peasy lemon squeezy? Okay. All right, so that is it for today then, my friends. You may pack it up. I'll see you in 20 minutes or I'll see you tomorrow. Okay? All right. Bye.